Well, what I'd like to do is share with you my adventure as I pursued these prophecies. You know, if one prophet doesn't give you what you want, you got to go try some other prophet and see if he gets an answer you like better. And Yogananda's prophecies were fine, but they're fragmentary, and they don't give me any sense of the timing. And I went, is there anything else that I could look for? You know, where else could we get any enough information to, you know, really feel we got what we need? Well, I looked at astrologers, and they've got it. They all say we're in the time of change, and they can tell you how the change is related to the Jupiter doing this and Saturn doing that, but what? They're no good on specifics. It's fine in retrospect to go back and look at the astrology and say, oh yeah, we could have seen that coming, but you couldn't. So that wasn't really an avenue. And then there were psychics of all sorts you find on the internet. Everybody's saying, you know, everything's going to change, but who do you trust? You know, where are they coming from? They're channeling somebody, but you have no idea who. So there's no way of evaluating who. So what I zeroed in on was certain remote viewers, and particularly the work of Stefan Schwarz. Now, Stefan Schwarz, I first encountered him as he was using psychic means of guiding archaeological digs with success. And then I kind of didn't have much contact for a long time, and then he showed up again on the internet and discovered that he had started a project back in '78. He'd been training remote viewers, and so he had a whole large cadre of remote viewers. And what he did was ask his remote viewers to put themselves into 2050. And then he would ask them how to describe the world that they knew in 2050. And then he would ask, how did it get that way? Well, he had some success. The data he was collecting then, he developed a protocol. The whole thing with remote viewing is that you have a very strict protocol, and it allows you to have some measure of your accuracy. So I thought this is good. They can measure the accuracy, and yet it's based on intuition. Futurists are just using reason to extrapolate the past and present into the future. So that wasn't interesting. But using intuition in a very structured way, like they do with remote viewing, seemed to show promise. Well, his remote viewers were able to see the fall of the Soviet Union, and at the time that was inconceivable. How could the Soviet Union ever? We were in the middle of the Cold War, and it just would seem inconceivable the Soviet Union would disappear, but it did. So they got that one. They anticipated the climate change and the sea rise, and that was before climate change was an issue. It anticipated the rise of terrorism, and they talked about 10 pandemics. Well, we hadn't had any pandemics, but they described one that was conveyed from monkeys, and it was a blood disease from the primates, and that was AIDS. So they nailed that too, and expected additional pandemics, which we've had. They anticipated the division of the United States into two cultures, and that's big, and that's very, very recent too. So I thought, okay, with a track record like that, maybe I should pay attention to his future insights. So he promised he was going to write a book, but it never seemed to materialize, but he's put out a few reports, and I can appreciate that he doesn't describe in detail, because that would kind of poison the remote viewers. So we just have sort of general ideas. So here's what he says. And based on those hits that I just mentioned, and others I suppose, he estimates he has 83% accuracy, which is very typical of remote viewers, professional remote viewers. So they predict the, what he calls Christo-fascist dismantlement of American democracy. So apparently that's here to stay. He says it reaches the climax in 2040, and in 2040 we have a collapse of civilization. All right, not exactly what that means, but it doesn't sound good. But between 2040 and 2045 is a complete change in human civilizations. So that's the change point. You know, we identified it as back in 1200 BC for the others, and for 532 or it was for the other change. So according to them anyway, this will be 2040, 2045. So here we are. That's 15 years hence. So that's getting pretty close. All right. By 2060, he says the changes will be seen as past. So he's after projecting people to 2050 for some time, he then advanced a new program where he asked them to go to 2060 and look back. So by 2060, things are settled. We're back to a working society, but things are entirely different. People are organized into small communities, all right, small rural communities. Here we are, just what Master predicted, and we've been working toward. They're off the fossil fuels. We don't use gasoline anymore, and they're charging cars, he says, on the highway. You drive down the highway, and there's electricity in the highway, and it charges up your car. Sounds great. He says people don't move around much. Okay. Racial and gender issues are not important. I think that's real good news. But the political power has moved to the states. Well, that's we can we can see that beginning to happen. And when I think about it, that's what you need in times of catastrophes, where we have storms, floods, earthquakes, these kinds of things. You need local help, not federal. I mean, the federal government has done a poor job in the hurricanes and things that we've had recently. And but if that power goes to the states instead, I think that would be much better. So distributed power, decentralization. You see, the way Swami put it when he talked about what was going to happen, he talked about combination of decentralization and centralization. And so breaking up the power in the states to the individual states sounds like it's moving in that direction. Minimalist lifestyles. We'll all feel right at home there. But here's another really encouraging thing. He says the illness profit system, that's his description of our health care system, the illness profit system has given way to a universal birthright single payer system. Okay. Transactions with cash have disappeared. Well, that's pretty much already in process. But the main thing, the essential thing, is that the profit motive, the idea that you're more successful if you're more profitable, has given way to a model where you're more successful if you've improved if you've contributed to well-being. Well-being becomes the measure of success. You can still have capitalism, but with well-being as the motive rather than just excessive profit. And so that means we have by that time rebuilt our whole society around principles that are more Dwapara Yuga than Kali Yuga. This is all very encouraging. It's very, very hopeful. Now, who's going to build that? Who's going to be here between 2040 and 2045 and 2060 and build that? The people that are young people now, some of you. What an opportunity. What an opportunity to redesign society, to start from scratch, from the remains of the chaos of the collapse of civilization, to have an opportunity to build the next age, to build the society of the next age. It's wonderful. We live in a terribly exciting time, a tremendous opportunity. He talks about some of the consequences of the weather change. Well, what he does, what this fellow Stefan Schwarz says, is that this move toward authoritarian governments and away from democracy is coming out of fear. It's well established in research that people unconsciously or subconsciously can anticipate future threats. Even simple experiments where they show people pictures on a computer and that some of them are ones you'd react to and others are not. The ones you would react to, they anticipate before the picture is even decided by the computer. People build up their the fear is there already subconsciously. So society as a whole is anticipating the coming difficulties that are stemming from, he says, from global warming, and reacting to that and seeking out the authoritarian government. Everybody wants, some powerful figure to come in and make everything right again. And the problem is, of course, that those people do not have our interests in mind and don't make things right. They make things worse. But he points out the consequences of global warming. As the water rises, what's going to happen? The cities on the coast will suffer most. And those people will have to move inland someplace. I think in our area, I visualize the San Francisco Bay, Oakland, and San Jose. Those are all low areas where there's a lot of people, and they'll all have to move somewhere. But all at once. It isn't just at the same time. It's happening in all the different places along both coasts and the Gulf Coast. A lot of low places. The water's rising. People have to relocate. That's huge. And when there's storms, like the hurricanes, the low-lying areas get the brunt of the water. And so we have disasters. But it's one thing to have an occasional isolated disaster, and it's something else to have things all over the country at once. And be really hard to handle it. So these things can be pretty difficult. So, well, okay, but that's fine, but there's no talk of war in that. And that's puzzling, because Schwartz's remote viewers were all over the globe. They weren't just in the United States. but he's no mention of war. So that's a puzzle. Does that mean that somehow since Master's time, we've raised the vibration of the world enough that that war doesn't happen? Or what? Or is somehow these remote viewers blind to that? It's an open question. I don't have an answer to it. And what about the other prophecies that Master, about the catastrophe, the cataclysm? You don't know what a cataclysm is coming. I don't know. As far as the weather is concerned, yes, the global warming will bring us ever more powerful storms. And as Master says, and Charles too, the intensity of those storms is the result of the turmoil in our consciousness. So that'll be there. Well, now there's one more source. Swami Kriyananda was especially fond of Padre Pio's predictions. Well, now, during Padre Pio's lifetime, he denied ever making any predictions. People attributed predictions to him, and then he denied them. But after his death, a paper appeared, which is attributed to him, saying that he'd had a vision, or a series of visions, I don't know, of the future, and they had shaken him, and he'd written them down, and was sharing them with the world. So, is that legitimate or not? Who knows? Swami Kriyananda said that somebody had told him that there was some record of Yogananda verifying one of the predictions that Padre Pio made. So maybe it was on the basis of that or his own intuition that Kriyananda thought we should pay attention to Padre Pio's. So I looked at his stuff. What does he say? Now, this was a vision that he experienced just a few months before his passing in 1968. He saw cities engulfed in flames, oceans rising up in waves swallowing coastlines, mountains collapsing, spiritual collapse and deception everywhere. A turning point coming that would separate those who were awake and prepared from those who were asleep and blind to the changes. Okay, that's interesting. Catastrophic earthquakes, violent storms, solar storms disrupting technology. That's a very real risk that we take. And I'll come back to that and talk a little bit about the sun as a possible thing. Disruption of natural order, loss of seasons. Well, we saw that in some of these other things where, like the Scandinavian idea of the 3 winters in a row. Economic and governmental collapse, okay. A new system would be offered that would be a trap of deception. So lots of deception. You know, one of the characteristics of Dwapara Yuga is that we don't depend on authority. But to go from depending on authority to not having to depend on authority, there's this place in between where you are very easily deceived into depending on false authorities, and this is what we're going to be seeing, he says here. Mind control, fabricated signs and wonders, layers of lies. Here goes AI. It can produce all of that very, very easily. And technology becomes a force of control. Well, that's certainly in place, especially in China, but also here. There would be a great separation time when people would reveal if they would stand unwavering in the light of truth or be swept away by the deception. That's kind of like that other thing earlier. Predicted 3 days of total darkness. The sun and the moon disappear. 3 days of darkness. That was the one that Swami Kriyananda said that somebody told him that Yogananda had also predicted. 3 days of darkness. And I think that's part of one of the Marian apparition prophecies. I've kind of lost track of which one. And at that time, homes shut and barricaded as if the air outside had become hostile. Fear and confusion drips all but those who are spiritually prepared. Okay, so that's what we need to do, is prepare ourselves spiritually. The only light is from candles. But before the darkness falls, a deafening sound, a roar of thunder shaking the earth. And after 3 days of dark, a radiant light would break. Well, here we go. Now the Schwarz's remote viewers didn't see that. So I think that tells us that either that's not going to happen, or it's happening later in time. That it might not be part of that short period of chaos. I don't know, but keep that in mind. It might be that is something that the remote viewers could be blinded to.
They're only 83%.
They're only 83, and there could be something. I don't understand enough about remote viewing, but it could be that it may be hard for the remote viewers to actually see things that are really, really bad. They may be blocking it themselves because they experience it. What they see, they experience. Which is one reason when they talk about remote viewers doing police work, that they say it takes a great strength to do that, because if you're looking for a missing child and it's the body is mangled in the forest somewhere, you're there, you see it, you're part of it, and that's very rough. So there may be something psychological that prevents the remote viewers from seeing the most violent things. I don't know. That's a speculation on my part. I'm trying to make sense of all of this. But this business of the sun disappearing for 3 days, it harks back a little bit to that one of these other things where the sun was like the moon for 18 months. And the idea of having to draw the drapes and close the windows and block the doors, and the air being poisonous and burning candles inside, to me adds up to a solar eruption. Because in a solar eruption, there'd be a lot of electrical activity. So there'd be lightning outside, you'd want to close the windows so you weren't blinded by the ultraviolet light. You couldn't breathe the air, it'd be full of ozone. And somebody told me that if you have ozone and you burn a candle, the candle flame neutralizes the ozone. I haven't verified that, but that's a possibility. So all these things add up to a description of a solar eruption. And so look into that. Say, what's that going to be? Well, our sun has eruptions from time to time. And the most recent one of any note really was back in 1890-something, they called the Carrington event. And it was strong enough, all there was in those days was telegraph lines, and it was strong enough to disrupt the telegraphs. And in some places they put enough electricity in the lines that they could operate the telegraph without any batteries. And other places it burned up the equipment. Now we have electronics everywhere, and if we had something just like the Carrington event, we would be reduced to no computers, no money transfers, no records. You couldn't do commerce. We'd be in really bad shape. You also couldn't do war, because war is just as dependent on electronics as our industry, our business world is. So, and a little study, people are studying the history now, and they find evidence I think in geology is where they're finding it, that we have those kind of eruptions and larger ones fairly often. It's only just been in the last, a few decades really, that we've been so vulnerable to it. So That could be a trigger for the Great Depression very easily. Could wipe us out in a day and just ruin all kinds of
Is that sort
transactions.
of an example of that? Is this aurora borealis?
Well, just
Becoming more and more
just in the last few weeks, we've had some things. You see, the magnetic field of the Earth is diminishing, and it does this every once in a while. And it's the strangest thing. The year of that Carrington event, the North Magnetic Pole started wandering. It went from Canada, it's headed over towards Siberia. It's gone across the pole already, across the geographical pole. And this is called a polar wander, and it happens, and when it's happened in the past, it's been associated with extinctions and weather changes and all kinds of things. So that seems to be happening already. That's underway. But in the course of it, the strength of the magnetic field of the Earth is diminishing. Well, that magnetic field is what's preventing particles from the sun from actually reaching the surface of the Earth. They come in, they're guided by the magnetic field into the poles. And if there's a kind of a hole in the magnetic field, they couldn't, in fact, reach the Earth, but that's almost unheard of, except a few weeks ago, when an opening in the magnetic field opened up over Spain and Portugal, and all the electricity went out, and they had a terrible time. And the official explanation was an unusual atmospheric event, and that's nonsense. It was a magnetic field event. And the thing is, the sun wasn't putting out any special extra energy. It was just the normal, all the time flow of particles from the sun. But because the magnetic field happened to have a weak spot, face the sun, then this came in and disrupted the electronics. So that was pretty bad. And then just a couple of weeks later, you had reports that there was huge aurora seen from Australia around the southern pole. And again, the sun wasn't doing anything special. So what happens when the sun does do something special? The magnetic storms that have resulted have been oversized. They've been more intense than the stimulus from the sun would lead you to suspect. That's because of the weakening of our magnetic field. So the Earth is exposing itself to solar eruptions. Well, the sun can even do a really powerful eruption called a micronova. Used to be, they thought novas were special stars that just exploded, and that was the end of them. And then they began to realize that some stars explode periodically with some pretty long periods. And they began to realize that maybe all stars do that, and it's just we don't know about it because the periods are so longer than our observation time. And so our own star could be part of that. A couple of years ago, the star Betelgeuse, the bright red star in Orion, dimmed visibly. And they said, okay, it's getting ready to go nova. It starts fluctuating in brightness, so it becomes dark. Here's a description of what happens, it's thought to happen, when a star really gives a major eruption. The sun shines down with life-giving light that looks yellow and white as it crosses the sky, but one day that will change. Dust, gas, and plasma will begin to accumulate in the sun's atmosphere, causing a dimming to a reddish hue. When the sun darkens almost black from accumulation, the light and solar plasma cannot escape, and the energetic pressure inside the solar atmosphere grows. The pressure eventually overcomes the outer shell, erupting in a micronova. So here we have the sun darkening, and then exploding in a bright. So the initial eruption will produce a bright flash of visible UV and X-ray light, which may thermally and energetically destroy parts of the biosphere. This is the burning aspect described in the Buddhist Sermon of the Seven Sons. This phase will not last very long, a few minutes or a few seconds. And for the next 4 to 20 hours until the shock wave hits the Earth, energetic protons and electrons will be bombarding the upper atmosphere, delivering an incredible excess of electricity. Ambient atmospheric electricity, telluric currents, atmospheric pressure cells connected to the global circuit will be amplified. So we'll have lightning out of the sky, and even from point to point on the Earth or from the ocean to the land, lightning bolts. Okay. When the shock wave arrives, it'll be a long impact. Hours, days, weeks. And he goes on, more electrical disruptions that will destroy every power grid, create more unstable electricity conditions, cause sun-facing magnetic field collapse, arc discharge, and then it goes to another phase. It says, at this point, the dust begins to block out the sky, and it lingers in the inner solar system, and the larger pieces of the shell arrive as impactors. So we have meteors coming into the Earth and impacting. Well, I can go on. That's a speculation, but it's scientific speculation. And it matches up with the description of Padre Pio's and other sources. And it appears that something like that happened up here at the Younger Dryas period. Robert Schoch is a champion of that. He says it created what he calls the solar-induced dark ages, which is all of this some thousands of years before civilization really got going again. It's what reset. And you notice we're just 12,000 years away from that. And we're seeing the same polar excursion of the North Magnetic Pole. So that could be the cataclysm that Master predicted. But if Schwarz is right, that's somewhere further into the future. But then again, who knows? The main thing is, as we pointed out, is not to fear, because whatever transpires, we came here to experience it, and we have a role to play. And it doesn't matter how long our life is. We have a tremendous opportunity to rebuild the world when it comes in a few years, and we have the opportunity to help others approach these things with an elevated consciousness and a realization that whatever's happening is happening because it has to happen in order to get the future, in order to get us into Dwapara Yuga, into the next age. So nothing's happening by accident. Even things that seem bad may be beneficial in the long run. And we don't know. So how do you know? You meditate, you tune in, you use your intuition. If you can develop that intuition so that you're in the right place at the right time, then you have nothing to fear. So that's the key. And everybody who's I know of that's written about the Yuga cycles or written about these things to come always ends up in the same place. Meditation is the answer. It's only through meditation that we'll be, as I say, find ourselves where we're supposed to be, when we're supposed to be there, and in the position to help others. Does that make sense? So that's as far as I've taken it so far. I don't think we can know the future any better than this at this point.
You know, Our Lady of Medjugorje have the same prophecies.
Yes.
And somebody asked her, you know, when that happens, is there time to convert? She said, no. You have to find your center before and, you know, connect with the divine. But when you start seeing the signs, it's too late.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I just keep my eye on what this future world is going to be. This is a very exciting time. I mean, one of the things, besides the the huge shift to go from profit motive to well-being motive. Well, let me back up a little bit. One of the other things I meant to mention was this reduction of population. I was wondering about that at one point. It was when I was on a seclusion up here, in fact. I remember Swami Kriyananda making a remark in India, I'm told. Someone asked him, why are there so many people here? This place is just the world is overrun with people. And he said, they've come here to die. Oh, wow, what does that mean? Well, I saw a news program when the Israeli-Gaza war was getting underway. And they were interviewing a fellow who was standing amid the rubble in Gaza. And he says, my entire extended family was in this building, in this apartment building. I don't know, he said how many, maybe 20 or something like that. But they're all just in the rubble right now, and the whole neighborhood is rubble. He's the only one left in his extended family. I thought, how can that be? How can that be a good thing? What can that mean? And I began to realize, I never heard anybody else say this, so it's just what was coming to me, that an extended family like that would be very tightly wound in their karma. There'd be a lot of karmic connection between them. And wherever any part of that family was incarnate, the rest would be drawn to come. Because, that's the soul family. They've got to be together to work out their karmas. So, if we move into Dwapara Yuga, and there was any of those people left, if any of those survived as a nucleus, then the rest of that family would have to incarnate. But maybe there are people who really need the Kali Yuga experience, but they couldn't get it because they were so tied to their group and its circumstances, its culture, the neighborhood, the house, all of that would draw them there. And the only way they could break that cycle and be free to incarnate on another planet somewhere with the Kali Yuga experience would be if they all died at once. Then they'd be free to find their own way. And so I think maybe that's what's going on when we see this mass die-off that everybody seems to predict. So, again, you want to be with the Dwapara Yuga family. but people are here, and this Swami said, they're here to die. They're here to have that experience, to work it out. So things may look bad, but they're not really bad, you see. They're all part of what it takes to get from here to there. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. And so we talked about the solar eruption possibility, and the fact that each one of us is where we are because we've signed up for it. We've signed up for the experience we're getting. So we can never say that things ought to be different than they are. That's the key thing. As long as you're accepting, if you're saying things are the way they have to be, and nothing you can do about that, then you can accept that. You don't have to get all upset that something should be different and we should go out and wave a flag or something to try to change it. Each one of us has a certain sphere of influence, and within that sphere of influence we can help raise the consciousness of everything around us and encourage meditation and the development of intuition that's needed to get through this time, but more than that, to actually play the role that we're here to play. We've come for purpose, and we need to be in the right place at the right time to exercise that purpose. So that's the thought I'll leave you with. Thank you.
We're at a point in time, I look at our lives as being climbing a set of stairs. And if you slip someplace on that set of stairs, you go boom, 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 and you slide down, sometimes all the way to the bottom, sometimes not all the way. But we're at a time where we're one step from a landing, 4 foot square. And if you happen to slip and fall on the landing, you stay on the landing. You don't go boom, 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 boom. You might have to take a remedial course, but you're safe there. And that's the promise that we have now, is that this landing is available to us, and we just have to figure out how to get there. And I think part of it is realizing that, we're in a dualistic situation here, and that applies to us too. We have two things going on. We have our physical and our spiritual, and they have merged together. And we're at a time where we're starting to separate them out and to realize that the one that's going to go on eternally is the spirit, that these bodies are just here for this short experiment. Sometimes as I've grown older, now I'm feeling I have 1 foot on the dock and 1 foot on the boat. And, it's making that leap. It's a bit scary, but I can feel the separation of my soul spirit with my physical. That they're just two separate things in the same body. Even as a youngster, I felt that I was spirit occupying this animal. And so because I was occupying this animal, I needed to take care of it. That's housing my spirit during this period of time. And that brought to mind, there was a spiritual teacher I used to go to in New York, Hilda Carlton, and she said, "Kids, there are two things coming up. There's the Holocaust, that's man destroying himself." She said, "We have to do everything possible not to let that happen." She said, "And then there's the cataclysm. There's nothing you can do about that. That's Mother Nature cleaning her house. So just flow with it, and we'll know what to do, and we will be protected." Science is all over the board now. They're noticing that the core of the earth, that iron ball, is wobbling and changing a lot. The solar flares, they're saying if one of those lines up magnetically with our magnetic system, that it'll erase all of the electricity. And it's not that it's going to turn it off for a day or two, it turns it off because it fries all of the transformers, and it takes years to replace those. So learn how to live simply, and don't get hooked into electricity, because if it goes, everything goes. Stop and think about, what would we be here? We wouldn't have these lights. You wouldn't have had your cars to get here. We wouldn't be able to prepare food. We wouldn't be able to transport. I sort of giggled at one point. They were stored nicely, tins of whole grains, and they'd put nitrogen gas in to preserve it. But then I looked, and to grind up these grains, they bought electric grinders. And I thought, well, that's not going to work. There was not a hand grinder in the whole thing. So anyway, it's just be prepared. And I think that's what Mother Medjugorje was saying. You know, start looking at the divine within you, and that will give you the information you need to get through this. And she says, don't wait till the last minute because it won't work. And she talked about the light, the darkness and the light coming.
Mm-hmm.
She said that there will be a sign in the sky. So we just have to be aware.
I still have the kerosene lights in the cabin.
Yeah. And we have all the tools. We just have to recognize it. And the biggest thing is letting go. Detach, detach, detach. Not what we think it should be, but what it is. I've hit points of time where I would just be in a slump and depressed and reeled down. At one point, I rolled out of my bed. I couldn't even get up to stand up, and crawled over to my meditation area. And I looked right at Yogananda, and I said, "Sir, I'm giving this all to you." I felt I came off my cushion. I got so light. Cheeky as I am, I said, "You could have said all." I would have done all, but I found out I've had to do all several times. There's always an all beyond the all. And so just be aware and be willing to follow that light.
Charles, you were pointing out that everything has consciousness. Even a table or a rock has consciousness. And I think, Byasa, we had a conversation some time back about the sun having consciousness. It's a conscious entity. And you had you gave an example of how it was behaving in a conscious way towards mankind.
Yes.
And I'm wondering, since you have that information and we have that idea, what can we do to support the sun and perhaps mitigate what's coming to us?
Well, people used to worship the sun. They used to get up in the morning and thank the sun for rising and shining. Yeah, the phenomenon you're referring to was very visible just a few years ago when the sun was not very active, but it had some sunspots which were flaring. And again, I watch the sun on the computer fairly often, and as the sun rotates, it would bring into view a spot that was flaring. It was just really active and putting out stuff. But as this got toward the center of the sun, it would quiet down and be quiet. And then it got over to the limb again. It would start being flashing and then putting out stuff again. So this earth facing quiet just happened over and over again. It couldn't just be random things. The sun was being kind to the earth and not blasting it at that time. So, nobody could find any other explanation for that. So it seemed like the sun was conscious. So yeah.
You know, if you look directly at the sun, you go blind. But we can look at the sun by looking at the moon. The moon is the reflection of the sun, and we can look directly at the moon. So to me, the moon is like our great teachers. It's like Yogananda, Jesus, Buddha, is like the sun. They're translating the intensity of the sun to us in a form that we can deal with. And our energies are part of it. Yogananda has a poem, Samadhi, that it takes a while to get to where you can understand that, reading it over and over again. But then you realize that is the consciousness, that is the universe, that is the body of God. It's a fabulous poem. It's a long poem, but it's him traveling out into the universe and explaining it. It's samadhi. It's what we have when we have that connection with God. But we have to be prepared. I think we can remember the story in the Bible of St. Paul, who had that flash of vision of the divine and went blind for a period of time. You can't look directly at the divine without the preparation, but we can look at the reflection of the divine while we're in this physical body. But this physical body comes and goes, but your soul goes on forever, and it's trusting that you are not this, you are that. And that you can shed this like a snake sheds its skin, and just keep going. And remember, none of this goes with you. All of your emotional heart chakra stuff is what goes life to life to life. It never dies. Always was, always would be. We are part of God like a cell in your little finger. Now that cell in your little finger can't declare that I am Charles. No, but you are part of Charles. And we are part of the divine. And by working to that point, then we have access. This cell in my little finger has access to the whole rest of my body, what's going on. As we have access to this whole cosmic phenomena that's going on, that Byasa has so succinctly put in. And science is starting to talk about this now, about the core of the earth changing, the solar spots. If they line up exactly with our magnetic field, they'll fry all electricity. So what? If we're grounded and centered, we'll know what to do and when to do it. So stay open. Don't fear. Fear will crush you. Joy will move you through. Not happiness. That's almost an illusion. Happiness is very transitory, but joy is forever once you find it. We have that thing, what joy is within you. It's I think it's this symbol. It's on my hat. That joy is an inner thing, and out of that joy will come the information that you need to weather this storm. It's like Byasa often answers a question that I'll have through the ethers, not from his presence or from him talking, but you can just pick it up, and if you open, it'll be there. There's not a question we can ask that we can't get the answer for. It's the internet of the sky, the Akashic Library. And we all have library cards, and we just have to use them.
All right, let's give him a hand.